In a prior video, we looked at the sons of wrestlers who went on to have great levels of success. But it's not just the men this rule applies to. No, the same can also be said for the women too. And that's because, with women's wrestling only getting stronger every day, more and more daughters of past icons have risen to the top too. But what are the biggest examples of this? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. And if we're going to start anywhere with this one, let's do so with maybe the most famous example of this, as well she may live in the shadow of being the offspring to the most powerful man in the entire wrestling industry, Vince McMahon. It doesn't mean Stephanie isn't a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Yes, at first glance, it would be easy to see the billion-dollar princess's success as a side effect of nepotism, but that's not entirely true. As while her family name certainly did help open doors for her in the halls of New York, it's not like she hasn't worked hard to earn her position in the years since then. It doesn't matter if it's in the ring, where she's been both a fairly regular on-screen authority figure and occasional wrestler, or off-screen, where she's served as a high-level executive, Stephanie has always brought something to the plate. Hell, during her time as an in-ring performer, she's even managed to have some surprisingly entertaining bouts against the likes of Trish Stratus, and her feuds with folks such as Chris Jericho and her husband Triple H were among the better ones of their era. Of course, for as much as this is what many fans will likely associate her with the most, it really is behind the scenes that the McMahon daughter has had the biggest impact on the industry, as after serving as the head writer of SmackDown for a while during the early 2000s, she eventually moved on to even higher positions when she became Executive Vice President, Chief Brand Officer, and then CEO of the entire WWE. Sure, this latter role was only a temporary one, which came about after Vince McMahon was briefly forced to resign from his post, but the fact that Stephanie was the person called upon at this point showed just how much trust her peers had in her. That said, since then, it looks like the Hartford native may have followed in her brother Shane's footsteps by leaving the industry behind altogether, as after stepping down to let her dad regain control of the company in 2023, she's decided to divest herself of any involvement in the industry going forward. And yes, if rumors are to be believed, this was at least partially because she disagreed with the sale of the once family business to the Endeavor Group, but whether that's true or not, the results are the same regardless. She can now branch out into other areas of the business world and try her hand out there instead. In doing so, however, she unfortunately won't be available firsthand to see the rise of our next subject, and that's a crying shame because if Ava has even a thimbleful of the talent her father The Rock has, she'll be a megastar before long. Now, we know that to compare this Florida native to her dad is already putting an unreasonable amount of pressure on her, as very few people have ever reached the heights he did back at the turn of the millennium. But these comparisons are something she's going to have to get used to though, as the higher she rises up the ranks of NXT, the more people are going to take notice of what she's doing. And what she's doing currently is serving as a member of the Schism, Joe Gacy's villainous stable, with her there playing the role of enforcer to some degree, not that dissimilar to what Rhea Ripley is doing with the Judgment Day over on Raw. Does this mean that Ava will one day find the same level of success as the Nightmare? It's entirely possible, because with her family lineage, she is going to get plenty of opportunities to shine on the brightest stage. So when her main roster call-up eventually comes then, don't be surprised to see her rocketed right to the title picture, where she can show that the NYE family remains the force to be reckoned with in wrestling. Hell, if she's called up within the next year or so, she might even get to be part of the Bloodline angle. One person who definitely won't be aligning themselves with Roman Reigns, however, is our next subject, as despite also having island heritage, when it comes to Tamina, her father Jimmy Snuka is actually from Fiji rather than Samoa. Not that this ever slowed down the Superfly though, as during his peak years at the tail end of the Territory era, he was at points the biggest babyface star in all of New York. Yes, even as Bob Backlund was holding the WWF World title, you could make a solid argument that it was Snuka fans were paying to see, as with his massive levels of charisma and daredevil in-ring style, he always stole the show. So obviously then, once his daughter Tamina decided she wanted to hit the ring herself in the early 2010s, there was a lot of pressure on her to live up to the expectations set by him. How would she fare when it came to this? Well, while she may not have been a true breakout superstar, the Washington native did at least manage to carve out a nice role for herself on WWE TV, particularly during her run as manager of the Usos. And once that was done, she'd even spend some time as the resident powerhouse of the women's division through her various associations with the likes of AJ Lee, Sasha Banks, Nia Jax, and Natalya, the latter of whom she became women's tag team champions with for a while. Sure, she might be yet to win any singles gold, but there's still plenty of time for that yet, because with her now being a member of the SmackDown roster full-time, we're sure she's got her eye on Io Sky and her WWE Women's Championship. That said, even if Tamina never wins the belt, or the comparable one currently being held by Rhea Ripley over on Raw, it won't make her career any less worthwhile, as there are plenty of top names who never managed to capture the big one. Of course, that's partially because other big stars have had so many title reigns it's often hard to make space for anyone else, something Charlotte Flair, daughter of the legendary Ric Flair, can personally attest to. Yes, it's become a bit of a meme at this point that whenever a new women's champion gets crowned on WWE TV, the Queen shows up like a shark who smells blood in the water. And while this can often make fans groan as she's usually just given the title shot at this point, it's not like she doesn't have the in-ring skills to back up the position she's in. No, like her dad, Charlotte is quite simply one of the best wrestlers of her generation, and that's something she's proven time and time again ever since debuting on NXT in 2013. It doesn't matter if she's going up against Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Asuka, Ronda Rousey, or any countless number of others, she always puts on a banger, and she always comes out of things with people talking about how great she is. Hell, it's this very skill level which has seen her become a 14-time women's champion in just a decade, a feat which no one else has been able to achieve before. And with this meaning she's now only 2 wins away from beating the Nature Boy's canonical WWE record of 16 world titles, it's only a matter of time before she's being heralded as the greatest women's superstar in history. Of course, even that likely won't be the end of things for the North Carolina native though, as with her still being in her 30s, there doesn't appear to be any reason for her to slow down anytime soon. No, by the time she's done in fact, there's every chance she'll be a 30-time world champion. Who knows? Maybe she'll even go on a world tour at some point and start grabbing belts from other companies as well. Charlotte holding the Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, Stardom, Impact, and Ring of Honor titles simultaneously? Stranger things have happened over the last couple of years alone. But for as wild as that would be, one woman who'd likely want to stop the Queen in her tracks if she attempted to do such a thing would be our next subject, and this is because Raquel Rodriguez no doubt wants such an honor herself instead, if for no other reason than to make her father Rick Gonzalez proud. Now we know many fans might not be as familiar with Rick Gonzalez's work as they are with someone like Ric Flair or Dwayne Johnson's because he was never a star on that level. No, instead he was more of a journeyman performer, someone who went from promotion to promotion, often acting as a lower card act or an outright enhancement talent, helping others get over in the process. When it comes to his daughter, she never had any intentions of filling such a role. No, she was only interested in reaching the top. But then why wouldn't she be, as at 6 foot tall and 178 pounds, she's everything both Triple H and Vince McMahon could want in a dominating women's star. Hell, this is probably why she found so much success early on in her NXT run, with her there not only becoming a 2-time women's tag team champion and the winner of the 2021 Dusty Rhodes Classic alongside Dakota Kai, but also a 1-time world champion as well, after defeating the mighty Io Shirai for the honor. And that wouldn't be the end of her success either. No, after being drafted up to the main roster in 2022, she'd also go on to win the women's tag team titles on 3 separate occasions, once with Aaliyah and twice with Liv Morgan. So now with tag team gold having been achieved on both a developmental and bigger scale, does this mean her next goal will be to win a singles belt on Raw or SmackDown? If we were taking a guess, we'd say the answer to this question is yes. It's just a case of who she chooses to challenge for the belt at this point, Rhea Ripley or Io Sky. Sure, you could argue that given she's already beaten the latter for some gold in the past, this would be the most sensible option, but then Raquel Rodriguez has never been one to back down from a tough challenge, so there's every possibility she wants to be the one to dethrone the Nightmare instead. Of course, if she does manage to beat any of these women, there will be a long list of challengers looking to go after her following that as, like any good champion knows, having such a prize immediately paints a target on you. And of the people who'd be most hoping to beat the Texas native is someone who also has a famous father in the industry, and that's Natalya, the daughter of Jim Neidhart. Yes, it's time to look at the Hart family, one of the most celebrated in all of wrestling history, as with its ranks including names like Bret, Owen, Stu, and Davey Boy Smith, there are few, if any, who can compete. But while each of these figures have since left their days in the ring behind, that doesn't mean the legacy of the Calgary clan isn't still being carried on, though in current day WWE it's being done so by a woman rather than a man. And that's because, while folks such as Hetty Hart and Davey Boy Smith primarily work on the indies, Natalya has been a lifer in New York ever since she first debuted there in 2008. Sure, during her early run, she may not have had the same level of talent she has to work with now, what with this being very much the Divas era of WWE, but she was always able to stand out anyway and help carry the flag for women's wrestling during a time when it needed it the most. So as a reward for this, once the mid-2010s came and the likes of the Four Horsewomen all rose to prominence, the Calgary native was given the opportunity to really let rip and show what she could do against some of the best performers of her generation. And how lucky fans were to get to see this, as some of the matches she's had during this period have been nothing short of classics. In fact, it was during one of these at August 2017 SummerSlam that Natalya even got to win the SmackDown Women's World title for the first and only time in her career. That said, with her now entering her 40s, the question remains as to how much longer the daughter of Jim Neidhart can continue to perform at the same level she's currently performing at. After all, by the time her father reached her age, he was already winding down his own career when he segued from a partnership with his cousin Bret Hart into a less successful one with Owen Hart instead. But then the Anvil was never as good in the ring as his offspring, so there's every possibility she'll continue on for a while yet, with her helping to get a whole new generation of talent over, a generation which included the likes of our next subject, daughter of Santino Marella, Ariana Grace. That's right, the popular 2000s WWE comedy act may be done as an active in-ring competitor at this point, but that doesn't mean his family lineage isn't still going on, because over in NXT, his own flesh and blood has started lacing up her own boots too, with the intention of one day reaching the top. Now, whether or not she'll ultimately do this remains to be seen, as it's still very early days for Ariana, but based on what we've witnessed so far, she has a pretty good shot, as she seems to have inherited her dad's mechanical skills inside the squared circle. Sure, we've yet to see much in the way of character from the Toronto native, but that's partially because she spent an extended period on the shelf with an injury recently. Once this is fully healed up though, and she's ready to make her return, it'll be interesting to see how much she's progressed in that area. Of course, she may never have as much charisma as her father, but that's a high watermark for anyone to reach, and shouldn't stand as a mark against her in such a situation. No, the truth is that even if Ariana Grace has half of the charm her dad had when it came to creating a memorable gimmick, she'll be set for life. And who knows, with Santino still a part of the industry as an authority figure on the Impact roster, there's every possibility the two will even get to share the screen one day, either if he returns to New York or if the two companies manage to agree to some kind of crossover event. That said, we wouldn't hold our breaths for the latter happening, as if history has proven anything, it's that WWE doesn't play well with others. And it's for this same reason we'll likely never see them acknowledge another second-generation female who made her name in TNA. Who are we talking about here? Why, the daughter of the late great Carrie Von Erich, of course, Lacey Von Erich. Yes, ever since breaking into the business in 2007, Lacey has been able to carve out a nice career for herself as one of the most underrated talents out there. Sure, her being so low on people's radars is probably helped by the fact that she never really had a proper run in WWE like her dad did, but that doesn't mean she hasn't been killing it elsewhere. No, whether it be in TNA as part of the Beautiful People, or in indie promotions like WrestleLicious, the Dallas native is always shown. But given her family lineage, this one should only be expected, as her father Kerry was at one time one of the most famous people in the entire state of Texas. In fact, alongside his brothers, back in the 80s, he was a complete rock star to local audiences, with this making him the undisputed king of his father Fritz's WCCW promotion. And even once his time there was done, he continued to be a big hit when he jumped to WWF and portrayed the role of the Texas Tornado for a while. But will his daughter ever get that same chance in New York? It's hard to say. She's certainly deserving of it, and given she once had a developmental contract there in 2007, it's not like the company aren't aware of her. We suppose it's really just up to fate at this point then, and if fate shines down upon Lacey Von Erich in the right way, we'll be excited to see what she does in the ring against the likes of Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair, or any of the countless other women on the roster, women who also include our next subject today, the daughter of Paul Van Dale, Carmella. But wait, we hear you ask, who was Paul Van Dale? Well, like with Raquel Rodriguez's father Rick Gonzalez, he was a popular journeyman performer throughout the 80s. And with him being an always reliable hand, it meant work was always available for him no matter what territory he was passing through, particularly if that territory was WWF. That's right, during the days of Hulkamania, Van Dale could often be seen acting as an enhancement talent for other bigger names. That said, once his daughter Leah decided she wanted to get involved in the industry herself, she took the same stance as the aforementioned Raquel Gonzalez when she decided to be a star rather than a star maker. So when she was signed up to a developmental contract with WWE in 2013 and was there rebranded as Carmella, she immediately set about proving she had what it took to be a top-level performer. And boy, did this work out for her in the end, because following a period on the developmental brand as the manager to Enzo and Big Cass, she'd make an immediate splash on the main roster once she was called up there 3 years later by quickly getting involved in the Blue Brand's women's main event scene. Still though, for as much as she tried during those early months, she wouldn't be able to win the big one, as at that point, the SmackDown Women's title was being dominated by the likes of Becky Lynch and Alexa Bliss. Of course, this all changed in 2017 though, as after winning the first ever Women's Money in the Bank ladder match, the Massachusetts native went on to cash it in on Charlotte Flair to finally stand on top of the mountain and hold world title gold around her waist. No doubt then, this made her father very proud, just as it probably also made him proud when his little girl subsequently went on to become both a one-time women's tag team champion alongside Zelina Vega and a 4-time 24/7 champion as well. And as if that wasn't enough, alongside her sometimes dance partner R-Truth, Carmella has also become a winner of the Mixed Match Challenge. The only question left then is, what does she still have to cross off her bucket list? A Raw Women's title win, a Royal Rumble win, maybe even a WrestleMania main event. Anything's possible, and before all is said and done, she might have achieved all three of these. One person we can say with a fair degree of confidence won't have the same level of success, however, is our next subject today, and that's because she's not really a wrestler at all. No, she'll always be more of a brand above all else, using the industry to get herself over. But then, given Brooke Hogan's father is the legendary Carney Hulk Hogan, this shouldn't come as too much of a shock. Honestly, the Hulkster's lies about some of his career highlights are so widespread at this point, it's hard to believe anything he says anymore. And that's a shame, because he's legitimately had one of the most storied careers of any wrestler ever. But he's still a man who took wrestling to all new levels of mainstream success during the 80s. So obviously then, once he had kids, he wanted to let some of his success rub off on them too. And that's exactly why, in the early 2000s, when his daughter Brooke was trying to kickstart her singing career, he'd do everything he could to get her noticed, including having her star alongside him in the god-awful reality TV show, Hogan Knows Best. And once that show ran its course, and the Tampa native was looking to reach the next level with a career in acting, the Hulkster further boosted her profile when he got her a job with TNA, the very place he was helping to ruin the identity of at the time. Yes, it wasn't a great time for fans of Impact, and it was only made the worse when Brooke made her debut there in 2012 and quickly found herself being inserted into the role of an on-screen authority figure. Still, it could have been worse, right? The youngest child of Terry Bollea could have gotten involved in an on-screen romance with Bully Ray. Well, as it happened, that's exactly what took place, with this marking an absolute creative nadir for the, at the time, Nashville-based company. So maybe it's for the best Brooke Hogan's time with the wrestling industry came to an end soon thereafter, but even if she wasn't exactly the best representation of a second-generation star, the same can't be said for everyone else we've discussed today, as between them, they prove that sometimes girls really can do it better.